In today's video, I'm not only going to show you how you can create this piece, I'm going to give you lots of tips and ideas for creating jewelry and any art that expresses your own unique creative vision. Hi there, Sandy here. Welcome to another polymer clay jewelry video at keepsakecrafts.net. In this video, I'm not only going to show you how I made that necklace, but I'm going to share with you a bit of my design process, because this one I did a little bit differently than I usually do, and I think you'll find it helpful in designing your own pieces. It started with these 4 cutter sets that were sent to me by Samantha at Jessama Design. I picked them out all without anything in particular in mind. I just liked them. I liked the funky hearts in this set. This is Heart Mixed Set number 2. I'll have links to everything I use in this video at my blog post and down below. So I like that these are all just kind of different heart shapes, not your usual. And I thought this was an interesting set. It's called Pebbles. And they're just little pebble shapes. And yeah, you could cut these out yourself, but there's something to be said for just having these to work with and design with. This one is called Freesia. And what I like about this set, and this one's called Bali, that they're both 6-piece sets, and they have mirror images and graduated shapes, which is really helpful with the process I'm going to show you. Already I'm playing. So what I did, I had a very busy day where I was bringing in the garden harvest. I was canning and dehydrating and blanching and freezing, and I didn't have time to really spend creating. But I dumped all these out on my table just like you see here now, and I started playing. And every time I walked through the room, I rearranged them. So like I said, it was helpful that these were in graduated sizes, because I could maybe try one and say, well, what if I did a smaller size, or what if I did a bigger size? Or what different things can I do? I was really determined to use these differently than maybe the obvious way of taking like these and just arranging them. I mean, to me, this is pretty obvious to make a necklace like this. And there's nothing wrong with that. They look very nice. It's wonderful. But I wanted to do something different. And that's where I started to play. I didn't think to take photos until I had already done a few setups, but even just taking this out of the bag and seeing the way these nest together, seeing the graduated shapes, let's see, like that. Now that's suddenly kind of interesting. Here's a couple photos of things that I did, and I ended up going with one of them. It was something like this. I was trying to go somewhat asymmetrical, and so this is ended up being the final design that I'm using in this necklace. But you could, do all kinds of things. You could have, how about a stack of hearts down here? At one point, I think I had one of these down here, or maybe, how about this? I noticed that if you put these together in a certain way, you could make something like a lotus blossom. So if you had like this, see, and then the same on the other side. I have it upside down, I know. But so just playing. And I think the best way to do something like that is to set it up like this and then walk away. And that's what I kept doing all day. I was busy doing other things, and then I'd walk through the room and I'd stop and do something else. It kind of felt like, those magnetic words that you would put on the fridge and make poems, and then every time you walk by you'd change a word or shift things around to make a different poem and maybe make it a little bit better or different or whatever. It kind of felt like that. Every time I walked by, I would do something different with it. Yeah, that's kind of fun. Or you can, in the photo I had something with these kind of made wings on the hearts. Or like a butterfly winged heart. So you can just have fun doing this and come up with all kinds of things that you might not have originally. So once I decided on my design, I sat down and made a prototype. Here's my prototype, and it was good to have this because I used it for some experimenting for things later on. I also got this wonderful honeycomb mold from Samantha, and I absolutely love it, and I decided I wanted it to be going across my heart. I just like the organic edges, and I love this mold. More about that in a bit. This was an interesting technique, and I'll save this for another time and share it with you. I'm happy with the way it came out, but I didn't really like the color, and I decided to go in a different direction. I found myself with a little bit of time, and so I sat and did a sketch. This was the first one, which kind of most closely resembles this, but I had in mind to do like driftwood here, which was interesting. And then I just kept going, and I am not a fantastic sketcher, as you can clearly see, but just laying these things down on a paper and pushing yourself. So once I got the first 4 done, I felt like I didn't want to do any more, so I made myself do another 4, and different ideas came out, and clarity came out. I liked the little bee. I thought he was cute. The flowers are maybe too busy. I noticed that backgrounds that were busy I didn't like so much. This one's kind of cute. It's got words on it, kind words. I like honey, sweet to the soul, healing to the body, which is a proverb. And I also got the idea of dripping honey, which you can see I experimented with this, and I'm more on that later too. I decided I really liked the look of just kind of an open, airy, light design on the heart. So I decided to silkscreen it. So this is my binder where I keep my silkscreen designs, and it was very handy having this and having the cutter because I could just lay it on there and see no, too busy, maybe, but not really what I wanted. This one was kind of cute with the under the sea theme, which I thought would go interestingly with the driftwood, but and I just kept flipping until I found the one that I liked, which is this one. It's a CreateAlong silkscreen with these light swirly vines. Not so much interested in the roses, but I just liked the scale of it. So I used that to silkscreen on my clay. For my clay colors, strangely enough, I decided to go with neutrals. I had chosen some driftwood for my piece and picked colors that I thought would enhance it nicely. This is Sculpey Souffle Cowboy, and I mixed in some 18 karat gold to get this color, which I think will go nicely. And my honeycomb is 18 karat gold with some translucent mixed in. So I think that's a really nice neutral palette. Totally bizarre for me. I usually go for jewel tones, but something was just saying neutrals to me. And I won't go into the details of silk screening. It's pretty simple. You put your silk screen down. It's lovely doing it on clay because it sticks to the clay. Add a line of your paint. I'm using gold paint here, staying with that palette, and then you just squeegee it over. And let it dry. It doesn't take long to dry because there's actually very little paint on there. Once the paint is dry, you can place your cutter wherever you want it to be on your shape. Use a clay blade to just cut roughly, leaving maybe 1/4 of an inch around all sides. You don't have to be exact with this. It just makes the next step a little easier to get rid of some of the excess. So this sheet of clay is rolled out on the number 1 of my pasta machine, the thickest setting. And I have here another sheet rolled out on a number 2, so the second thickest setting. So lift up your clay with the cutter and just lightly press that into the clay. You don't want to cut through it, you just kind of want to stick it on there. Flip it over and start to press in with your fingers. It helps to have the clay nice and thick here so that you're not going to risk tearing it. It's clay, so you should be able to stretch it and get that nice puffy look. Just gives it some dimension. You could go in with a ball tool, but I find I tend to make a mess of it and rip it if I do that. So I'd rather do my fingers because I can feel what I'm doing. Once you have it as puffy as you like, place it on your sheet of clay that's rolled out on the number 2. And an acrylic block really helps here in pressing straight down through all those layers. Just peel away the excess. And this clay with the paint on it, I just roll it up and use it again, and the paint sort of just disappears. Take out your cutter, and there you go. One thing about these cutters is there's a ridge there, and it may cause a bit of a line on your clay. You can just go over it gently, stroking it with a finger to clean that up, and also use your clay blade. Actually use the blunt side, just be careful, and kind of clean up any ragged edges from the cutter. Although I will say Samantha's cutters have a nice sharp edge. That's why they have that ridge there, because it gets thinner. And so it does cut beautifully. It's just if you're cutting something thick like this, they're beveled inward, so you have to watch for that. You can clean this up more after, but it's always easier to do while the clay is not baked. Next we're going to add our honeycomb. This is about 1 part 18 karat gold to 8 parts white translucent. Make sure your clay is nice and well conditioned. And then roll a smooth ball. There shouldn't be any creases or cracks in it because they will show in your finished mold. I really like this mold of Samantha's, and I wish I had gotten more. It's just a nice firmness. It's squishy enough so that you really feel like you can do some serious pressing and get that clay in there and get all that texture. But it's not so squishy that it's annoying and the clay pops out and you kind of feel out of control. So I think it's just perfect. And I love this mold. I like the scale of the texture. I like the shape. I like the organic edges. I just kind of like everything about it. So you can come at it from a few different directions to get the bat nice and smooth. Although in this case it doesn't have to be perfect. Then just come in from the edges and clean up any little lip of clay that might be there. And pop it out of the mold. Isn't that awesome? I love that. I keep saying that. Now I'll add some liquid clay to the back of my honeycomb and add that to my heart. While I'm doing this, I just want to take a moment and say thank you so much to those of you who are my patrons. I so appreciate you. All the different levels of support is so encouraging to me, and we have a great time over there. If you're not a patron, we have polls every week where we get to know each other. There's tips on Tuesdays and creative musings on Mondays, and sharing what we're working on Wednesdays. It's just really a fun time. And also, patrons have the opportunity to get up to 2 bonus tutorials every month. If you're a regular here and you enjoy my videos and you watch me every week and you'd like more, you might consider becoming a patron. It makes a difference, and it is a huge factor in whether or not this channel stays on YouTube. So there's that, and that is going to go in the oven. I will bake this. It's going to be baked again, so I'll bake it at the manufacturer's recommended temperature for half an hour. Here's one I did earlier out of the oven. Now this one had just a little bit of the white translucent mixed in with the 18 karat gold, and this one had a lot more, and I'm definitely happier with this. And here's another design tip for you. Don't be afraid to go off and leave things for a while and come back and look at them with fresh eyes. I made this last night, and I got up this morning and I looked and I said, that needs something. You can see I tested a little bit over here. It needs just a little something to bring out that texture. And what I have here is Gilders paste in cream. And it's dried up a little, but there's enough on here. And suddenly I'm like, ooh, wow. And I think that will really also help tie it in more with the driftwood. So I was pretty happy with that. Now I'm going to add a backing to this, and this is a sheet rolled out on a number 4 setting of my pasta machine. And I'm going to texture it with another tool I got from Samantha, this really cool spiral roller. I've always been frustrated by using these until I finally figured out that you don't have to try to get the whole thing in one pass. Because if you do that, well, I'll do it on this side just to show you. If you do that, it's just kind of inevitable that at the end, actually that came out pretty good. No, at the end, you can see that it smooths out just a bit. Oh, and by the way, I tried adding my backing at the same time as I made my puffy heart, but what happens is that as you're pressing down, it smooths out the texture. So if you want a nice deep texture and an even texture, then do it in 2 steps. So that's why this back is smooth, and now I'm going to add the texture. But what I meant by that was just kind of feel the amount of pressure you're giving. Roll until you need to stop and reposition your fingers. And then carry on. And stop. And carry on. And if you have a pretty good feel for how much pressure you're adding, I can see where I stopped here, but it's not as bad, I don't think. I think it came out much more even and a nice deep texture than the ways I've done it before. So add liquid clay again to the back and add your backing and then trim it out. Once again, I want to say thank you to Samantha for sending along all these products of hers for me to try out. She really has a great shop full of goodies for those of you who like to create with polymer clay over on Etsy, and I will be sure to link to that below. And she also has wonderfully creative tutorials here on YouTube. So be sure to, if you haven't watched her videos yet, then be sure you do. So I've rolled out some clay for my border on a number 3 setting of my pasta machine, which is the 3rd thickest. So to review the top, the part that I silkscreened is the thickest setting, number 1. The part underneath that made it puffy, that base for the puffy heart, it was a 2nd thickest, number 2. The border is number 3, and then the backing is a number 4. Or thereabouts, it doesn't have to be exact. I have a little trick here for you for cutting the strips for your border. This is just 2 clay blades, this is a dangerous looking device, sandwiched together with neodymium magnets. And you can control the thickness by controlling how many magnets you put in there. So I have the 2 sharp blades aligned, and I'm not going to cut it straight down, I'm going to angle it and just kind of hold these 2 magnets pinched together up here and cut a strip. Oh. Okay, let's stick that down better. And I need 2 of these, somewhere around 4 inches long, to go around the edges of my heart. I already added some liquid clay to this edge. And we'll just tuck that in. And wrap it around, and we can cut off any excess that has to go around the honeycomb. To get this edge nice and mitered, just draw in your mind a straight line down through the heart and then continue that line right here. And that will give you a nice miter once you add your other piece. Miter the other side, just push this one out of the way for a moment and then repeat. And you can put those together. Get that nice and neat and tidy. And there's one more thing I'm going to do before I bake this, and that's to add some dripping honey. To make our dripping honey, we're going to use Fimo Deco Gel. Actually, I guess it's not called that anymore. It's just Fimo Liquid. It used to be Deco Gel. You need maybe ½ a teaspoon or so into a small dish. The trickiest part is getting the color of this right. We want a nice, well, honey color, an amber color. You may already have an alcohol ink that will work for this. I had to improvise with the colors I had. Now add in 1 drop. This is Piñata Sunbright Yellow. If you have other alcohol inks, then by all means experiment until you get a color you like. This was what I came up with. 1 drop of the yellow to start with. You can always add more. Now this Calabaza orange, and these both come in the a pack of 9. I think it's called the Exciter pack as opposed to a starter pack. So add just a tiny bit into another container. Like the smallest amount you can manage into another container. Get yourself a toothpick and dip it in that and add it to what's in the bowl. Seriously. I found this was a great mixer. You can use a popsicle stick, but I have this little silicone spatula from something else because we're working with such a small amount. So that yellow is a little bit bright yet. So take your toothpick. Do not be tempted to put an entire drop of the orange in. You will be sorry. Really, these tiny little amounts that look like nothing. Just keep mixing until you get, you can kind of see it on your spatula. It starts to get that warm honey color. It's maybe still just a little bright. So I'm just rolling my toothpick in there, and that will probably do it. If you add too much, it just ends up this orange that looks like honey no bee ever made. So even this is pretty bright, but putting it up against this actually works pretty well. And now you can add that to your honeycomb wherever you want. And using the spatula means you can pick up like every little bit of it. Because what I really want are globs that are going to drip. You can add little dabs, you can add bigger blobs. Kind of just wipe it on the edges. And notice how it's starting to drip down. Oop, I want that drip. As I tilt it. And there. So tilt it up on something like a piece of batting or something to keep it tipped up. But you don't want it on the tile because you've got your background here that will end up shiny. So just bake it tipped up onto something so that your honey will drip down while it's baking, and you'll get a really great effect. So I would bake this at the manufacturer's recommended temperature for an hour. Here's the piece out of the oven. I think it came out pretty cool. And now it's time to design the rest of it. So you may have noticed that the only cutter that I actually used in this was the heart, but the other cutters were definitely helpful as design tools informing my decisions. So I went through a whole bunch of driftwood, and if you don't have driftwood, you could sculpt it out of polymer clay, and then you would get the exact sizes and shapes. I just happened to remember somebody gave me a box full of driftwood, and I went through and just carefully picked out pieces that I liked, that I thought had some interest, like this one with its little knot here. I definitely want that one. And then this. And I pulled out some beads. I couldn't decide whether I wanted matte, like these. So these are in place of those Pebbles cutters that I showed you before. So that's kind of cool. Or shiny beads. So here's an oval one, and maybe only one of those instead of two here, since it's longer. And I just went through and actually literally held this piece over my box of beads, held this piece and the driftwood over to try to decide which ones would work. And there's these. I've got several of these. These are from either the August or September dollar bead box. But I don't think I want to have them all match. I kind of like this warm one. It helps go with the warm honey down here. I just love the way that came out. And I think I'm liking the shiny, because I've got a little shiny here. We've got matte, so we've just got a bit of a contrast going on. Do I want 2 beads here? So you just sit and play and make your decisions. What would you do? What would your choices be? They could be completely different. Yeah, I think just the 3 beads. 2 pieces of driftwood and the heart. So now we can do some assembly. The first thing to do is make this heart pendant hangable, turn it into a pendant. You could use a glue-on bail. I'm just going to use one of these little screw eyes. I'll have links to these. This drill bit is definitely too big. You can tell if you just hold it behind the screw eye, you can see it's much bigger. So this would not, if I use this to drill the hole for this, it would not hold. So I have to use this one. It's for miniatures. Even though this is threaded and you could twist it in, you don't really want to do that because you need to give the clay a place to go. So if you just stuff that screw eye in there, it might go in fine, but it's going to cause stress in your clay because it's just pushing it aside. So what I like to do is I drill in and then I pull straight out, and that pulls out the clay that's in that hole. And now I should be able to screw this in, and if you want you can add a drop of super glue to make sure it stays in there. Now what I have here is some 20 gauge wire. If you don't like the color of this, which I don't mind it, there's not so much showing that it bothers me, although it doesn't match, you could color it with something like vintage patinas, which are meant to be permanent on metal. I'm not going to do just one piece of wire going up through all of these because it just makes it stiff. It doesn't dangle nicely. So I think I'll have to decide how many loops of wire am I going to do. 1 for these 2, 1 for these 2, and then just 1 for this. So I'll cut, I don't know, just a length of wire, maybe like 6 inches or so. So just hold it in flat nose or chain nose. You just get a better grip with flat nose and run it through a pair of nylon jaw pliers. This will strengthen it and straighten it. So it'll make it harder so it holds its shape better. There. And using my wonderful favorite one-step loopers to make the loops. So there's 1 loop. Slide on my bead. Oh, I gotta trim off. Often there's a bent end where you're holding it with the flat nose. There we go. And then there's a little hole, I don't know if you can see that, right here on these loopers. And if you have a long piece of wire, you just feed it through the jaws and out that hole. I've done a whole video on using these. It's a great tool. It's a great time saver. I will link to that. And there's 1. Now for your driftwood, it actually drills super easy. So the trickiest part here is to figure out where I want it. I want it to be balanced and even. I think probably going to drill it about there. And if you want, you can use an awl to start, but it's really soft. So I'm just using this drill by hand, and it's going through very easily. Just take your time. Don't press so hard that you end up splitting the wood. Press just enough to let the drill do the work. There we go. And we'll repeat the procedure with the looper, making a loop. Slide on my driftwood. It does seem to be pretty well balanced. So good. And my bead. and make another loop and repeat for your other piece of driftwood and your other bead. So I have these all strung, and I was pretty happy to find a bail that I made out of this same wire a while ago. I made a video showing how to make this, and I will link to that. Now there was one more thing I was thinking of. I'm not sure, which is why I saved it until I got all of this done. Another thing I got from Samantha is this little jar of, it's like, I don't know exactly what it is. I'll have a link to it. It's like sea stuff. And I wondered, oh, I don't know, maybe not that much. If a little bit of that, I thought of putting a little bee here, but I wondered if that was maybe too on the nose, a little too obvious. I like this sprig, it's pretty, but it may be a little big. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. For now, I think I'll leave it off. It does seem to need something there, doesn't it? I don't know what, though. And that's one of those things where I could leave this on a table and walk by it every day for a few days, and then maybe something would jump out at me. Sometimes you go shopping and you get some random thing, and then it ends up being absolutely perfect. I'm going to string this simply on a piece of cord, just some dark brown suede, and I'll finish those with some cord ends and a clasp, and you're all done. So I hope this video has given you some ideas for designing interesting and unique pieces of jewelry.